as we think about all of the places around the world that are at unrest right now, with their lives so completely shattered, let us offer this evening that we share together as a blessing and sending peace in whatever way possible to them through our spirits, through our hearts, through the energy that's within us, so that we offer this session up together for the peace of the world. So we also each month have a healthy eating session. And I know last month we did homemade granola. And what I've been trying to do is try to figure out how am I going to share this moment with other people besides just myself so that we can expand the grace. So part of my Christmas gifts this year are going to be homemade granola in all kinds of containers so that I can share the recipe that we received last month. For anybody who was here last month, did you think of any creative ways you were going to use the homemade granola?
We have a period of time right before exams at Fontbonne University and like to have healthy food around. And so just made a big container. I think Miriam told us how to do a double. So I made, it was just a different way. I never thought about it as gifts. I should have done that, but it worked out for the students because I generally give them candy. So they were happy to get something healthy.
Did anybody else share, think of any ways that they were going to use the homemade granola? Well, if not, then we'll be ready for Sister Monica Kleffner's edition of oatmeal pancakes tonight. And now we're open to Linda sharing about our speaker this evening.
Well, I have the great privilege of introducing a fellow St. Louisan, though she has spent much more time, well, maybe not much more time, but quite a few years in Peru, ministering in a variety of capacities with our brothers and sisters in that fine place. She's presently back in the St. Louis area, ministering as a member of our congregational leadership team. This is Sister Sally Harper. And Sally is, well, you see it right there with that smile on her face. Not only does she bring us a good piece of spiritual information tonight, Sally gives us a sense of joy and hope in all kinds of things. She's always got a good line or two to add to her conversation with you. So I feel quite privileged to welcome Sally to this gathering tonight and to hear what she has to say about Jesus, the host with the most, the hostess with the mostest. And to turn it over to her now at this point. So Sally, it's all yours.
Thank you and hello. I really am very, very happy to be with you all this evening and to share about my favorite person, who's Jesus. And he, I think, has the host with the most. When they were thinking about that, this is fuel the body, fuel the soul. The first thing that came to my mind was thinking about Jesus and table fellowship. And so we'll hear a little bit about that this evening. In Matthew 11:19, Jesus is accused of being a glutton and a drunkard. It says, "The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.'" If we have an otherworldly image of Jesus, we could just mark this off to the enemies of Jesus making false accusations to sully his reputation. However, if we begin to look for the times that Jesus was at table, we might discover that there is some basis for the criticism. I am sure that Jesus didn't go to the extreme of gluttony and drunkenness, but he was a person who loved a good meal. His mother Mary was probably a good cook. And the reason that Jesus often stayed with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus in Bethany when visiting Jerusalem was, in addition to their generous hospitality, that Martha was a very good cook. But even more than the food and drink Jesus enjoyed, Jesus enjoyed what is called table fellowship, that coming together around a table for the sharing of minds and hearts that so often occur during a meal. Let's discover the significance of sharing a meal in Jesus' time and look at some examples. First, we have to understand that in the first century AD, people did not have a place setting with a knife, fork, and spoon alongside an individual plate of food. The food was served on platters in the center of the table, and each diner had bread similar to what we would call pita bread today. That bread served as a spoon for scooping up portions of the food from the common platter and bringing it to your mouth to eat. Everyone shared from the same dish. Now, for us today, that might seem unhygienic, but for the religious leaders in Jesus' time, there was a much greater concern over one dipping into the common platter, and that was the danger of breaking the communion of the covenant that the Jewish people had with God. To share food with someone was to accept them. If you were a righteous person, you would never dip your bread into the same platter with a person who was considered a sinner, or in other words, did not fulfill the covenant and was an outcast from the community of believers. And then there is Jesus. He was forever eating with sinners, those pesky tax collectors and publicans. Think of his celebration with Matthew, the tax collector, who left his profession to join Jesus's band of followers. At that banquet, the Pharisees questioned the disciples of Jesus about his behavior. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." And even worse, when Jesus sees that notorious tax collector, Zacchaeus, up a tree, he invites himself to dine in Zacchaeus' house. Now, it could be that Jesus heard that Zacchaeus had a great cook, but much more important is the result of Jesus sharing table fellowship with Zacchaeus. At the end of the meal, as a result of being accepted by Jesus, Zacchaeus was able to give away all his riches because he had found the treasure of being loved by Jesus. Here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, porque this man too is a son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost." The table fellowship that Jesus extended to so many outcasts and people on the margins was a significant sacrament of his ministry and became the hallmark of his all-inclusive love that left no one out of his ever-expanding circle. Jesus also used examples of food in his parables. He told them a parable using the image of leaven to describe the way the reign of God is kneaded into the dough of the world. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough. And Jesus uses the image of the grapevine to explain the intimate connection he has with each of his followers. "I am the vine, and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus also performed miracles around food. His very first miracle, according to the Gospel of John, took place at the wedding feast of Cana. Weddings were wonderful celebrations that lasted for 3 to 7 days, according to the wealth of the hosts. Jesus and his mother were invited to this celebration because of their connection or relationship with the family. As we know, while the celebration was still going on, the wine ran out. Bad news for the host family. Mary observes what is happening and solicits help from her son. At first, Jesus says no to his mom, but she, knowing her son so well, just turns to the caterer and says, "Do whatever he, Jesus, tells you." We know the happy ending when Jesus orders that the stone jars be filled with water and then turns the water into wine, and the wedding celebration continues. What is interesting to note is the amount of water turned into wine. The gospel tells us there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. If we do the math, Jesus provided 189 gallons of wine. Let the party go on. Jesus was never stingy with his generous love for others. Another miracle that involved food, and lots of it, is what is called the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. This time, Jesus has been speaking to the people for some time, and the disciples suggest that given the hour, it would be good to send the people away so that they can find something to eat. Jesus answered, "You give them something to eat." The reaction of his followers is predictable. "We only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. There is no way this will be enough for so many people, and there is no way we can buy that much food." In response to their credulity, Jesus begins to organize the crowd, telling his disciples to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Then Jesus blesses those loaves and fishes, gives thanks, and breaks the loaves. Then he gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. There are many biblical scholars who do not see this as an abracadabra Harry Potter waving his wand moment. The explanation is that in Jesus' time, many people, when they left home, took some food with them, the same as the followers of Jesus had done. When Jesus begins to share his food, it inspires all the people gathered in groups of 50 or 100 to share their food with those around them. By pooling their resources, there is enough food for everyone. More than enough, given the amount of leftovers. The example of Jesus' loving generosity and care for the people is contagious. And this calls us to contemplate the idea that if today the world's resources would be shared equitably, there would be enough for everyone. Something for us to ponder and put into action. In the days after Jesus rose from the dead, there was also a very important factor in one of his appearances to his disciples after the resurrection, when the disciples seemed to have grave doubts that this is really Jesus and not a ghost. He asks for something to eat. Eating was proof that he was really alive. And on the shore of the lake, Jesus fixes breakfast for his followers. We even have the menu: fish and bread over a charcoal fire. And finally, we have the most important meal that Jesus ate with his followers, what we call the Last Supper. As we know, the group gathered to celebrate the Paschal meal, following the Jewish tradition of remembering the night when the Jewish people were saved from the suffering and death in the land of Egypt. At this meal, Jesus not only offers bread and wine, but becomes the bread and wine, his total gift of self to everyone who joins in this meal, a gift that nourishes, that gives life, so that we may go out from this meal to do the same, give our lives for others. A person who is a glutton or a drunkard is someone who eats and drinks in excess. In some ways, Jesus goes to excess not to satisfy himself, but rather to give of himself totally, so that we may have life and have it in abundance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Well, first of all, I think we just hold Sally's words in our hearts for a few moments before we go on.